Right, let's go. Episode 5 of the Snatch Chat podcast. So by the time you're listening to this and by the time it's out on Spotify, etc., it is the new year. So happy new year. Let's make 2026 a really positive year of just weightlifting progression. Okay, so today's podcast is all questions that my athletes have sort of sent in. We've got some pretty cool questions in there. So yeah, let's just get started. So can I do other sports and training alongside weightlifting? The answer to that is yes. The thing with weightlifting, it's a very sort of high power output sport. So you put that with other sports such as sprinting, any sort of like power-based movement. So if you're doing, say, I've got a client who is actually part of, or she's doing bobsleigh. So the transfer from weightlifting to bobsleigh and even bobsleigh to weightlifting is really high. It's that sort of the power output. Sprinting, changing direction, they sort of carry over quite well. Or the weightlifting side of things will help to improve the power needed for running, sprinting, jumping, things like that really. So yes, it definitely does. And other training alongside weightlifting, again, so CrossFit goes hand in hand with sort of the weightlifting sort of style of training, especially as they've got weightlifting movements in there. So yeah, it definitely does. Next question. What's the biggest mistake you see amateur weightlifters make with their training? Oh, what is the biggest mistake I see weightlifters make with their training? I think there's a few, okay? The first biggest mistake with amateur weightlifters is that they try and get into the full movements too soon. So they don't break it down. They just go in and try and do a full snatch. And then they end up building bad habits. Normally in the snatch, it's just they're pulling the bar overhead. They're just pulling the bar to the shoulders in the clean. They're just pressing the bar off the shoulders for the split, for the jerk. What you need to do, and you do it with everything else in life, like when you were in school and you were doing maths, you didn't start off with fractions. Like you sort of built up to fractions. When you started to learn to drive, you didn't just get put onto a motorway and told to, yeah, let's just go for it. There were stages to it, and weightlifting is exactly the same. Learning anything is always the exact same. There's foundational movements, things that we need to learn, understand, master before then we start to layer up that movement. So the biggest mistake weightlifters make is that they're trying to rush into it rather than just breaking that movement down. I want to learn how to snatch. First, I need to be able to overhead squat. Once I overhead squat, let's put a little bit of speed into that movement and learn how to drop snatch. Once I've learned how to drop snatch, I'm now going to bring that bar into my hip crease. Can I dip, jump and land with the same speed and aggression that I found in my drop snatch? And then you layer that up to the hang snatch. From my hang, can I find the high hang to then the drop snatch? Everything sort of flows into one. And that's the biggest thing that I think weightlifters need to really try and, or people that are learning the weightlifting movements needs to really try and hone in on, is breaking that movement down and then layering it up once you've sort of mastered that first base movement. And if you are one of those people, little plug here, we have the Broomstick to Barbell program. I can link that below, but that is a 6-week course that actually goes through all of these foundational movements for the snatch, clean and split jerk and actually gets you to complete the snatch, clean and split jerk with good technique in just 6 weeks. So if you wanted a little, if you wanted a link to sort of see what that program is more about, I've just put that below here for you, okay? And then my next question, what's a moment in your life that forced you to slow down? Oh my bloody God. There's been a lot, okay? I remember when I first, actually, you know what? I think a lot of these all come down to the same thing. When I was 13, I remember waking up. So for those that didn't know, when I was growing up, I was a swimmer. I used to compete for nationally. But there was a lot of moments where, or my training was early in the morning. I used to get up at like 4 o'clock to get into the pool for 5:15, swim till 7:15, then go to school, come home, have some food before then going back out at 5 o'clock, training till like 8, 9 o'clock at night, coming home, and then doing that same again. So I remember that probably at the age of 13, I remember waking up and felt horrendously ill. like my heart was hurting. I couldn't stand up, just felt really, really sick. And that actually ended up to be overtraining. I was just absolutely worn out at the age of 13. It's fucking ridiculous, isn't it? But it is what it is. From 13 then, and I think sport has changed. Well, I hope to think sport has changed a lot since I was 13, and it's not necessarily forcing you to do more, and more is good. But anyways, yeah, from there then, when I first became a PT, I worked in a commercial gym. I was really, really busy. I used to work 7 days a week. I used to get up early in the morning, 4 o'clock, same thing. I think it's just a bloody thing that I've always done, but got up at 4, started coaching at 5, and I'd do that, and I'd work up until like 10 p.m, have some time off in the middle of the day. I'd train, and I'd train for hours and hours and hours, because I love being in a flipping gym. And I remember literally in one of my PT sessions, I had 2 women that I used to train, and I came in clutching my heart. I was in absolute flipping agony. And they were like, "You need to ring an ambulance." I'm not ringing an ambulance. So they rang 111. So it ended up being, then an ambulance turned up at the gym. I went off to hospital. So that ended up being signs of a heart attack. It wasn't a heart attack. Again, it was just the fact that I've overworked. Like I've just flipping buried myself into the ground. And then from there, then another time, I was constantly training. I train like 6-7 days a week. I train for 2-3 hours, trying to do more. And the way I've sort of grown up is more volume for swimming is better. So my way of training for weightlifting many, many years ago was more volume, the better it's going to get. The more I can do, the more I'm going to lift in the long run. And I'd used to squat every single day. And I remember going for a 1 rep max, 215, first time I ever lifted 215 kilos. I've got 3/4 of the way up, and I just felt this sort of, not pop, but something just go, feel a bit weird in my groin. Didn't really think anything of it. Remember speaking to the manager at the time of this gym, and I said, "Wow, what do you reckon this is?" Like, it's a bit of a lump in my groin. "Oh, it's like an ingrowing hair. Don't worry about it." Anyway, that ended up to be a hernia, and I think, yeah. So I've had many, many sort of moments in your life that forced me to slow down. But all of these show you that like overtraining, overworking, doing too much has always told me that that is the wrong thing to do. And it's the biggest thing I try and hone in on in the way I coach now is that, okay, yes, you want to hit a snatch PB, but we don't need to be doing that 5-6 days a week. You've got a lifestyle, you've got a life to live, you've got a job to work. We've got to try and find that happy medium where we can try and squeeze as much out of the training as possible that doesn't then have a detrimental impact on your life. So yeah, I've had, and I still find it now, like flipping, come back to the start of December 2025, like literally just gone, come back from the honeymoon in South Africa, and I've just worked and worked and worked and worked to the point where I got to like the start of December and I was like, I'm absolutely wrote off. 3 weeks back, and I've probably done like 6-7 weeks worth of work. It's just ridiculous. But it's always that one thing I'm like, I need to learn from this. What do I need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? But that is a goal for 2026, is just making sure that I'm actually listening to my body. Anyways, that was a long-winded question, or a long-winded way of answering that question. So how important is individual variation in snatch technique? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so when it comes to snatch technique, we have got things that we've got to hit, okay? Doesn't matter if you're female, male, 6 foot tall, 4'10". We have stable components, things that need to happen. Weight stays with the midfoot, the bar glides against the shins and the thighs. We reach the hip crease, we hit the drop, okay? There's areas that sort of need to happen. They're the stable components. Then you've got your variable components. Now, your variable components, again, there's a fine line between it's what works for you, but also it's your sort of style. So first thing to think about, your snatch grip position, that's variable. That's going to change between everybody that is listening to this podcast, which is probably myself and a family member. but hopefully there's a few more than that. But anyways, everyone in a gym that is doing Olympic weightlifting is going to have a different variation to the snatch grip position, okay, on the bar. That then, another variable component for the snatch would be hitting the bottom position. How tall should you sort of sit? Okay, should I have a slight lean forward? Should I be sort of trying to be upright? All depends on your mobility and your limb lengths. Okay, if you have a longer torso, shorter legs, you're probably going to be a little bit more vertical within that movement. Whereas someone that is shorter in torso, longer in length, longer in leg length, is going to have a slight lean forwards into that movement. So that is going to be another variable component or sort of style. But the biggest one here for me is how you land into that bottom position. Do you slide your feet? Do your feet stay exactly where they are, or do you bring your feet up and slam that floor as you hit into that the bottom of your snatch? That is again a variable component, and you need to try and find what works for you, okay? Not what looks the coolest by watching YouTube videos and Instagram videos. You need to try and find out what works for you. Some people jump and make a lot of sound when they land under the snatch, but if I try to do that, I feel really unstable overhead. My feet hardly move, okay? I've got people that I coach that their feet do not move at all. I've got people that jump and stamp and make a lot of noise. I've got other people that just slide their feet out ever so slightly to create their sort of bottom position of the snatch. That is a style, okay? So stable components, things that we've got to see. Weight stays to the midfoot. Bar wants to be nice and close to the shins. When we get to the hang position, the bar glides against the thighs. Bar is in line with the armpit crease. These are things that need to happen. These are like set in stone. This is the most efficient way of lifting. And then we have our variable or style-based components. Okay. Next one, what fixes more snatch problems, strength or technique? Now again, it's not black and white. I think they both sort of work in the same instance. So there's different ways to look at this. If I am teaching someone to learn the Olympic lifting movements, they are going to have a high focus on the technical aspects of it. But because we're working the technical aspects, there are still strength components against it. We're not looking to build strength within the snatch, clean and split jerk. We're looking for technical here, but they're accessory based movements, their squats, their snatch grip deadlifts, putting them under positional load. That is where we're going to try and build strength. So they sort of work in hand. Again, someone that has more experience within the sort of weightlifting movements, you would then have probably a little bit more of a focus on one or the other. But again, they both sort of go hand in hand. If you've got a client or a person or a lifter, it's all exactly the same, isn't it? And they are slow off the floor, that pulls them out of position, that is a strength problem. We need to try and build strength. So we might be looking at isometric positions, hang positions, etc., etc. Maybe even looking at improving pulling strength by working in a deficit, slow eccentrics, to try and overload that position so we can then end up looking to sort of pull faster off the floor. So that might be a strength focus, but still we can have a look at the technical aspects by looking at sort of hang-based movements. So the strength movements will be, you're slow at pulling off the floor. Let's look at deadlifts or pull variations that are going to highlight this area where you're weak, okay, and look to build that. But then we can also look to put our technique within that by looking at, okay, low hang movements. This is where we want to try and build strength and power. Let's look at low hang snatches. So they both sort of go hand in hand, okay. But yeah, so at the start, higher technical focus. Strength is more the accessory based movements, squats, pulls, deadlifts, etc. When you become more of an experienced lifter, you've been lifting for sort of 12 months plus, you'll probably find that you have less of a technical aspect and more of a strength aspect. But again, they both go they work together, okay? What habit or routine has had the biggest positive impact on your life outside the gym? There's a few here. So the habit was sticking to 3 sessions per week, okay, and making sure that I always get those 3 sessions complete. As I said in one of the other previous questions, it actually works in quite nicely. I have had many moments of overtraining, overworking. So I sort of brought myself down to this 3 days a week, and I try and keep it to the same pattern: Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I stick to that every single week, no matter what. Weeks where everything's really, really busy, I've got things on that is going to disrupt my Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I then front load the sessions. Okay, that might mean I might do a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday to give me or alleviate a little bit of time within the week. So it's always sticking to this these 3 sessions, and whether that's sticking to those 3 sessions, these are the same times that I train week in, week out, or busier weeks, my training is going to be disrupted. I am going to front load that to alleviate the sort of the pressure of that weekend if I can't train a Friday, if I'm at competitions. And again, if I was busy at the end of that week, but I'm now tired on a Sunday, I might then backload those sessions just to sort of give me that rest period. So the biggest habit is sticking to those 3 sessions, front loading or back loading, depending on what the week holds. But also with that, there's that element of recovery as well. Is knowing that, okay, I've had a really busy weekend. I'm going to feel like I'm going to feel knackered on Monday. So it pulls me out of my Monday session. But that means then I've got to still get my 3 sessions in. So whether that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'm still going to sort of stick to that routine. So yeah, there's that the sort of the routine of hitting those 3 sessions, front loading and back loading, dependent on the week and how my recovery is. But then the other one, and this is only something that I've started doing recently. And I went to a conference in November, and someone asked the question of, like, I write this to-do list and I'm constantly adding things to it, to the point where then I'm like procrastinating on where do I start? Okay. And this person, Chris Bodman, if you've never heard of Chris Bodman, he's a sports psychologist, and he's definitely worth looking up. He's so flipping good. And the way he captured the room in his talk was absolutely insane. But the biggest thing that stuck with me is the way he just went, don't write a to-do list, start writing a to-do list, or a to-don't list. And I laughed, and he was like, no, I'm being serious. And then he sort of went into it. It was like, write down the things that you're not going to do. Start with, you're going to make sure you're not going to start with the easy tasks. You're going to make yourself feel uncomfortable at the start of the week, so the biggest task gets done first. And anyway, he went on and on and on. And I was like, that's flipping awesome, because there's days where I struggle knowing where to sort of start and things that I'm going to hit. So for me, that was really, really good. I find myself procrastinating when I'm doing big tasks. So it might well be that I'm not going to have my phone in the same room as me while I'm doing monthly check-ins. That phone is going to be downstairs, I'm upstairs, I'm working. I get that job done so much quicker. So a to-don't list was fantastic, and a bit of a crazy way of thinking things. So how do you tell if a missed snatch is technical or just mental? So if we are inconsistently missing a weight, I would say that is a technical snatch issue. Okay, we have not got the consistency of hitting that movement. Okay, if you are hitting 85% doubles week in, week out, and then you miss a rep, that is more of a mental battle. Okay, a mental sort of drop within that movement. That's the bare bones of how I would sort of look at it, is the inconsistency of hitting certain percentages. If we aren't banging 80% here, every single day, on the good days, bad days, stress days, and then we're trying to push up that percentage, we're going to start to see the inconsistency make an appearance, and we only want really trying to work with consistency. Once we start to see inconsistency. We then look at working on more of the technical aspects and building a better or a bigger base within that percentage before then we start to move on. If you're failing a snatch, and sometimes, and it's those movements where it's sort of you've pulled it and you've just dropped it, I would say that is more of a mental barrier, because what you've got but then again, there's still that sort of technical aspect of it, is you're trying to just, you've lost that sort of momentum and how to sort of drop. So there's tension within that, and that is probably more of a mental fight than anything. But the mental aspect of weightlifting is huge. It's probably more mental than it is physical at times. And it's that one thing to sort of master. And I speak about it loads, but creating that sort of pre-lift routine, what you think about 5 minutes before your set, 2 minutes before your set, 30 seconds before you lift, into I am just about to lift that bar, has a massive impact on the outcome of that lift. So the first thing I would sort of look at is if you are consistently hitting 85% and then you miss a rep, that is that is more of a probably a mental fight, and you need to start to look at this. But if you have inconsistency within percentages from sort of 80% up to 90%, then that is where it's more of a technical aspect. Last question. Which is the best chocolate in the celebrations tin, and why is it the Bounty? You know what? I have not got a clue what chocolates are even in a celebrations tin. Let's just Google it. What chocolates are in a celebration tin? Images. Show me the box. Okay. So I can assure you that it is definitely not the Bounty. Surely no one eats the Bounties. It is Galaxy, just the thick block of Galaxy, not the caramel, or the Maltesers. They are two of the best celebrations. Anyways, that wraps up episode 5 of the Snatch Chat podcast. Hope you've enjoyed listening to it. If you haven't already, make sure to click subscribe, so obviously you get access once these videos get once these podcasts get loaded straight away. And yeah, I'll see you in episode 6.